He was a billionaire, a titan of industry who could buy or destroy anything, or anyone he wanted. She was a waitress, invisible, serving him his $500 bottle of water. When he wanted to insult her, he did it in a language he thought no one else would understand. He turned to his associates, and, in fluent Arabic, called her pathetic, a ghost, worthless. He expected her to just nod and walk away. He didn't expect her to freeze. He didn't expect her to turn. And he certainly didn't expect her to look him dead in the eye and reply in an Arabic so perfect, so aristocratic, that it made his blood run cold. That one sentence began the complete and total destruction of his empire. This is the story of what really happened. The clinking of silver against porcelain was the soundtrack of Sienna's life. It was a high-pitched, delicate sound that to her sounded exactly like a cage locking. She worked at L'Étoile d'Or, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign. It was a place where people didn't just eat, they performed. They wore their wealth like armor, their $1,000 shoes never making a sound on the plush, blood-red carpet. Sienna was, by all accounts, the perfect waitress. She was quiet, observant, and moved with a grace that seemed out of place. Her uniform, a simple, tailored black dress, was immaculate. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe bun, making her large, intelligent eyes the only expressive feature on her face. Her manager, a perpetually stressed man named Mr. Henderson, simultaneously loved and feared her. He loved her because she was the only one who could remember the precise water temperature preference of the wife of the CEO of Beaumont Holdings. He feared her because he knew, deep down, that she didn't belong there. "Sienna," Henderson hissed, snapping his fingers. "Table 4 needs their check, Table 7 is waiting on their amuse-bouche, and the VIP party is due in 10. "Understood, Mr. Henderson," Sienna replied, her voice a low, professional monotone. She didn't look flustered. She never did. Her only friend on the staff, a young waiter named Ben, slid up beside her at the service station. "VIPs, is it the mayor again? I hate the way he snaps his fingers." "Worse," Sienna said, balancing 3 plates on her arm. "It's Aris Beaumont." Ben winced. "Oof, Beaumont, the shark himself. Heard he bought the entire building next door just to tear it down because it blocked his view." "He did," Sienna said, her voice tight. My father used to know of him." This was the part of her life she kept locked away, buried deep beneath the plates of caviar and seared foie gras. She wasn't just Sienna, the waitress. She had been, someone else entirely. Around her neck, tucked beneath her uniform, was a small, heavy gold locket. It was her only remaining piece of that old life. A life where she was the one sitting at the table, not serving it. Tonight, the air in L'Étoile d'Or was different. It was charged, electric. Aris Beaumont wasn't just coming for dinner. He was coming for a meeting. 3 guests, the most private soundproofed room in the restaurant, the Savoy room, had been requested. Sienna went about her duties, her mind a fortress. She delivered the check to Table 4, a couple arguing quietly about their prenuptial agreement. She delivered the amuse-bouche to Table 7, a tech bro celebrating a Series B funding round by loudly describing his yacht. It was all a performance, and she was just another prop. As she was repolishing silverware, she caught her reflection in the gleaming surface of a wine chiller. She saw the exhaustion in her eyes. She had been doing this for 2 years, ever since her father's company, a respectable and ethical investment firm, had collapsed. It hadn't just failed, it had been destroyed, surgically dismantled by a larger, predatory competitor. Her father, a proud man named Ibrahim, had lost everything: his honor, his health, and, 6 months later, his life. Sienna, who had been top of her class in economics and international relations at Georgetown, was left with nothing but crippling debt and a name she could no longer use. The locket under her shirt suddenly felt cold. It had been a gift from her uncle, her father's brother, on her 16th birthday. A man who had turned his back on them the second the money disappeared. "He's here," Mr. Henderson whispered, his face pale. The front doors of the restaurant opened, and a cold wind seemed to follow the men inside. Aris Beaumont did not walk into a room. He conquered it. He was tall, with the severe, angular face of a bird of prey. He wore a custom Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Sienna's yearly salary. On his wrist was a Patek Philippe watch, a subtle Grand Complications model that was, to the trained eye, a statement of obscene power. With him were 2 other men. One was a sharp-faced American lawyer, all teeth and briefcase. The other 2 were Middle Eastern, dressed in equally expensive, though more conservative, European suits. Sienna recognized the type instantly. They were the money, the old-world power. One, Mr. Ziani, was older, with a cautious, intelligent face. The other, Mr. Al-Jamil, looked severe, almost sad, and kept his eyes down. Sienna's heart gave a painful, jarring thud. Al-Jamil. It was a common enough name, she told herself. It couldn't be. She forced the thought down, her professional mask sliding firmly into place. "Mr. Beaumont." "An honor," Mr. Henderson gushed, practically bowing. "Your table is ready. The Savoy room, as requested." Beaumont didn't even look at him. He was already scanning the room, his eyes dismissing everything, the decor, the other patrons, the staff, as beneath him. His gaze passed over Sienna without a flicker of recognition. She was furniture. "Our best waitress, Sienna, will be taking care of you tonight," Henderson added, pushing her forward. Sienna stepped into the light. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to L'Etoile d'Or. May I take your coats?" Beaumont was already walking toward the private room. The other men handed her their coats. Mr. Ziani gave her a brief, polite smile. Mr. Al-Jamil, however, glanced at her face, and for a fraction of a second, his eyes widened. He looked at the locket, just the chain of which was visible at her throat. He seemed about to speak, then stopped. He looked confused, then dismissive. He must have thought it was a coincidence, a cheap copy, perhaps. He turned and followed Beaumont. For the next hour, Sienna was a phantom. She moved in and out of the Savoy room, a silent, efficient ghost. She presented the wine, a 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild, and poured it without spilling a drop, even as her hand trembled slightly. The men spoke in low, clipped English. Business. Market destabilization. Leveraged assets. The final push. Beaumont was abrasive, even to his partners. He was arrogant, demanding, and utterly confident. Sienna was just the hands that brought him his water, the ears he didn't even register. The incident happened during the main course. Sienna was clearing the appetizer plates. As she reached for Beaumont's plate, he simultaneously gestured with his hand, talking to Mr. Ziani. His hand knocked her arm, just slightly. A single, heavy silver fork clattered from her tray onto the plush carpet. It made almost no sound, but in the hushed, tense room, it felt like a bomb. Sienna froze. "My deepest apologies, sir. It won't—" Beaumont cut her off, not with words, but with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. He didn't speak to her. He turned to Mr. Ziani and Mr. Al-Jamil, and then he switched to Arabic. His accent was passable, but cold. He assumed, with the supreme arrogance of the wealthy, that this lowly American waitress wouldn't understand a single, complex word of the classical dialect he was attempting. Unzur ila hadihi al-khadima, he said, a cruel smirk on his lips. Look at this servant. Sienna's blood turned to ice. He continued, his voice dripping with contempt, gesturing toward her as if she were a piece of meat. Latafam al-kalafia al-thathaniya lihatihi al-hayat. Tabdu ka'anaha latafam shay'an. Miskina. She doesn't understand the simplest background of this life. She looks like she understands nothing. Pathetic. Mr. Zayani shifted uncomfortably. He glanced at Sienna, then looked down. But Mr. Al-Jamil stared at her. Beaumont, enjoying himself, leaned in for the final, brutal line. Hathahi al-ashya, hum mujarad ashba. These things, they are just ghosts. Ghosts. The word echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of Sienna's mind. He had called her a thing. A ghost. The same word used to describe the hollowed-out companies his kind left behind. For 1, 2, 3 seconds, Sienna did not move. She didn't breathe. The fork lay on the carpet, a silver accusation. Beaumont was still smirking, waiting for his partners to chuckle. Mr. Zayani offered a weak, nervous smile. Mr. Al-Jamil was pale, his eyes fixed on Sienna's face, a terrible, dawning realization in them. In that silence, Sienna's training, her 2 years of humiliation, of being invisible, crystallized into something hard and cold. The fear was gone. The exhaustion was gone. All that was left was a pure, Arctic rage. She straightened her back. She did not bend to pick up the fork. Slowly she turned her head. Her large, intelligent eyes, no longer veiled by a servant's deference, locked directly onto Aris Beaumont's. The smirk on his face faltered, confused. And then she spoke. Her voice was not the quiet monotone of a waitress. It was a voice he had never heard. It was low, clear, and resonant, and it was in Arabic. But it was not his cold, business-class Arabic. It was the Arabic of high society, of diplomats and poets, a dialect so pure and aristocratic, it made his own sound like a child's clumsy scribbles. Al-Ashba, ya Sayyid Beaumont, hiya al-shay al-wahud al-ladha yajib an takhsha minhu, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. Ghosts, Mr. Beaumont, are the one thing you should be afraid of. She held his gaze. Anahum yaraun kul shay. Because they see everything. The freeze. It was instantaneous. Aris Beaumont's entire being locked, the blood drained from his face, leaving a sickly, waxy pallor. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The hand that had been holding his wine glass was suspended, trembling, in mid-air. He looked, for the first time in his life, utterly and completely small. Mr. Zayani audibly gasped, his hand flying to his chest, but it was Mr. Al-Jamil who reacted most violently. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly on the floor. He stared at Sienna, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror, recognition, and profound, profound shame. Sienna? He breathed, the name a pained whisper. Binti Ibrahim, Ibrahim's daughter. Sienna's gaze shifted to him. The coldness in her eyes melted, replaced by a deep, ancient sorrow. Naam ya ami, she whispered. Yes, my uncle. She had confirmed it. The man at the table, the one watching her be humiliated, was her father's brother. Her uncle, the man who had refused to take her calls after her father's funeral. This revelation hit the room like a second shockwave. Beaumont, finally processing the scene, slammed his glass on the table. Wine sloshed over the rim. "What is this?" he roared, switching back to English, his voice tight with fury and humiliation. "What is this trick? Who are you?" He was looking at her, but he was seeing her for the first time. The uniform, the bun, the tray, they all faded, and he saw the proud, intelligent face of someone who was, unmistakably his equal, or perhaps his superior, and it terrified him. Sienna did not flinch. She picked up the fallen fork. "I am Sienna al-Jamil," she said, her English as clear and precise as her Arabic. "Daughter of Ibrahim al-Jamil, the man your consortium ruined." She looked at her uncle, who had sunk back into his chair, his face in his hands. "And I am your waitress," she said to Beaumont. "I understand you were discussing the market. Shall I bring you coffee? Or would you like to discuss Project Phoenix?" The name hung in the air. Project Phoenix. Beaumont's face went from white to a dangerous, mottled red. That name was not supposed to be spoken. It was the internal codename for his most sensitive, most illegal operation. "Get out!" he hissed. "Get out!" "Certainly, sir," Sienna said, her voice returning to its professional calm. She turned, her back straight, and walked out of the Savoy room, leaving behind the wreckage of 3 very powerful, very terrified men. Sienna walked through the main dining room, a ghost in truth now. The sounds of L'Étoile d'Or, the laughter, the music, the clinking glasses, felt distant, like they were coming from underwater. She pushed through the swinging double doors into the bright, chaotic clatter of the kitchen. Ben was there, loading a dishwasher. He saw her face and immediately dropped a stack of plates. "Soph? What's wrong? You look like you just saw a ghost." "I need a minute," she whispered, her hands shaking so violently she had to clench them into fists. She fled to the staff changing room, a small, windowless, concrete box, and locked the door. She leaned against the cold metal lockers, finally letting out the breath she felt she'd been holding for 2 years. Ya'ami, my uncle. He hadn't recognized her. Not really. He had seen a waitress, a servant, and his mind had refused to make the connection. Only when she spoke, when she revealed her education, her bloodline, did he finally see her. The shame of it burned hotter than Beaumont's insult. But it was Beaumont's reaction that truly mattered. Project Phoenix. It hadn't just been a lucky guess. As she was serving, as she was clearing, as she was being insulted, she had been listening. Her mind, trained to absorb complex economic theory, had been picking up the pieces. They hadn't just been speaking English and Arabic. They had been speaking the language of corporate warfare. She had heard destabilization, Westwood innovations, trigger the 7-day default clause. Project Phoenix will rise from his ashes, final transfer by Friday. Westwood innovations. This was the detail that made her blood run cold. Gregory Westwood. He wasn't just a name. He was the only person who had helped her after her father's death. While her own uncle, Mr. Al-Jamil, had been screening her calls, Gregory Westwood, her father's former business partner and oldest friend, had paid for her father's funeral. He had offered her a job, a place to stay. She had refused, too proud and too broken, and had chosen to disappear into the anonymous service industry. But she had never forgotten his kindness. He ran Westwood Innovations, a small, brilliant, and, most importantly, ethical tech firm. It was his life's work, and Iris Beaumont was going to destroy it. The plan was clear to her now. Beaumont, with the help of her uncle's capital and Ziani's logistics, was planning a hostile takeover. But not a legal one. He was engineering a catastrophe. He was going to short the stock, trigger a fake default on a loan, and then, when Westwood's company was in free fall, buy it for pennies. Project Phoenix wasn't about building something new. It was about feeding on the corpse of a good man's company. And they were doing it this week. It was Monday. Final transfer by Friday. She had 4 days. She splashed cold water on her face, her reflection staring back at her from the cracked mirror. The waitress was gone. Sienna Al-Jamil was back. She marched out of the changing room. Ben was waiting, his face creased with worry. "Soph, Mr. Henderson is looking for you. The Savoy room. They're leaving." "Good," Sienna said, pulling the elastic from her hair. Her dark hair cascaded down her back. "Call Gregory Westwood. Get him on the phone. Tell him it's Sienna. Tell him I know what Project Phoenix is." "What?" "Soph, you're not making sense." But she was already walking. She didn't go to the staff exit. She walked straight back into the main dining room. Mr. Henderson saw her, and his face went purple. "Sienna, what are you doing? Your hair, your station." She walked right past him, towards the front door, where Beaumont, her uncle, and Mr. Zayani were being handed their coats by a terrified doorman. They saw her coming. Beaumont's face was thunderous. He stepped forward, clearly intending to have her fired, arrested, or possibly vaporized. "You!" he spat. "Me!" she said, her voice carrying in the now silent restaurant. Every patron was watching. "You are finished," he hissed. "No, Mr. Beaumont," Sienna said, stopping a few feet from him. "You are." She looked at her uncle. "Ya Ame, you have a choice. You can leave with him," she nodded at Beaumont, "or you can stay and speak with me. But know this, I am calling Gregory Westwood, and I am calling the SEC. Mr. Zayani looked like he was going to be sick. Her uncle, Mr. Al-Jamil, looked like a man broken. He looked at Beaumont, then at his niece. He saw his brother's eyes in her face. Beaumont laughed, a short, ugly sound. "The SEC. With what? The ramblings of a bitter waitress? You are nothing. You have nothing." "I have my name," Sienna said quietly, "and I have your entire plan. I know about the Shell Corporation in the Cayman Islands. I know about the forged default notice. And I know that you discussed all of it, in Arabic, in front of a fluent witness." Beaumont's color faded again. He hadn't just insulted her. He had confessed to her. "My car!" Beaumont snapped to the doorman, turning his back on her. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction. "Go," Sienna said. "Run. But I'm not the one you have to worry about." He paused, his hand on the door. "And who exactly is that?" Sienna just looked at him. "You insulted a waitress, Mr. Beaumont, but you confessed to the daughter of the man you ruined. You have to worry about everyone." Beaumont slammed the door, and Mr. Zayani scrambled after him. Only her uncle, Mr. Al-Jamil, remained. He stood alone in the center of the restaurant, a ghost in a $1,000 suit. The silence that followed Beaumont's exit was absolute. Mr. Henderson looked like he was on the verge of a fatal heart attack, his eyes darting between Sienna and the very powerful, very distressed Mr. Al-Jamil. The patrons of L'Étoile d'Or, having just witnessed the best dinner theater of their lives, were pretending not to stare. Mr. Al-Jamil took a single, trembling step toward her. "Sienna. Binti. I did not know." "You didn't want to know," Sienna replied, her voice mercilessly calm. The years of hurt, of unanswered calls, of grieving alone, were all present in that simple sentence. "When my father died." "Where were you, uncle?" "It was complicated," he whispered, his eyes pleading. "Your father, his decisions, they were not business. They were charity. He bankrupted himself." "He bankrupted himself being a good man," Sienna shot back. "A concept, I see, you have forgotten." "Sienna," he said, his voice cracking. "Ibrahim was my brother. I loved him. But Beaumont, he is not a man to be trifled with. He is a force. He doesn't just buy companies, he ends them, and the people in them." "I know," Sienna said, "and Gregory Westwood is next, unless you help me. Mr. Henderson, finally finding his voice, scurried over. "Miss Sienna, Mr. Al-Jamil, perhaps you would like a private room? Coffee?" Sienna looked at the man who had been her boss for 2 years. "I quit, Mr. Henderson." She then looked back to her uncle. "We're leaving. We're going to see Mr. Westwood. Now." She turned and walked out the front door, not waiting to see if he would follow. She heard his hurried, heavy footsteps on the pavement behind her. He was following. The ride to Gregory Westwood's penthouse was a silent, agonizing storm. Sienna hailed a cab, and her uncle, a man who had not been in a yellow taxi in 3 decades, climbed in beside her. The awkwardness was suffocating. He kept starting to speak, and she kept her gaze fixed out the window. They arrived at Westwood's building, a classic, elegant pre-war on the Upper East Side. Gregory Westwood himself was waiting in the lobby, his face a mask of anxiety. He was a kind-looking man in his late 60s, with a shock of white hair and his father's same honest eyes. He had clearly been pacing. "Ben called me," he said, rushing forward and enveloping Sienna in a hug she hadn't realized she desperately needed. He said your name was Al-Jamil, that you were Ibrahim's daughter. My God, Sienna. All this time, why were you a waitress?" I had to be, Gregory," she whispered, her composure finally breaking for a moment. I couldn't be me." He held her at arm's length, his eyes full of a father's warmth, and then he saw the man standing behind her. "Jamil?" Gregory's voice went flat. "What is he doing here?" "He's the one, Gregory," Sienna said, pulling away. "He's in business with Beaumont. He was at the table." Westwood's face hardened. "Get him out. I won't have that man in my home." "No," Sienna said, stepping between them. "We don't have time for this. Gregory, Beaumont is moving on you. Project Phoenix. He's planning to trigger a default on your new acquisition loan. He's going to do it by Friday." Gregory paled. That's impossible. That loan is secure. The financials are ironclad. How could he? He's not playing by the rules," Sienna interrupted. "He's falsifying the default. He has someone on the inside, or he's hacking the bank. I don't know. But he's going to short your stock, crash the price, and buy you out from under." All eyes turned to Mr. Al-Jamil. The man looked defeated. He sank onto a bench in the lobby. "It's true," he said, his voice hollow. "All of it. It's a shell company. Beaumont controls the bank that holds your loan. It's a simple journal entry. They will declare you in breach of covenant, even though you are not. By the time your lawyers untangle it, he will have triggered the margin calls. You'll be insolvent. He'll own you." "And you helped him?" Gregory's voice was lethal. "You helped this monster go after your own brother's best friend." "I didn't know it was you, Gregory. I swear," Mr. Al-Jamil pleaded. "It was just a name. Westwood. A file. A target. Beaumont. He said it was a predator company, that we were rebalancing the market. I didn't do my due diligence. I wanted the returns. The 30 pieces of silver." Gregory spat. "Enough!" Sienna's voice cut through the air. "I don't care why you did it. I care about fixing it. Uncle, you are going to fix this. You are going to give us everything. Every account number, every password, every name. You are going to burn Aris Beaumont to the ground." Mr. Al-Jamil looked at his niece. He saw her father's fire, her father's integrity, an integrity he himself had sold long ago. This was his chance, not just to save Westwood or his own skin, but to reclaim a piece of his soul. "He won't just go down," Mr. Al-Jamil said, standing up. "He'll take me with him. He'll take all of us." "Let him try," Sienna said. "He thinks I'm a ghost. He's about to find out what a ghost can do. I have a copy, Mr. Al-Jamil whispered, as if afraid to say it. Beaumont is paranoid, but so am I. I keep a dead man's switch, a drive. It has all the Project Phoenix data. It's in my office, safe. Gregory and Sienna looked at each other. A cold, hard plan was beginning to form. Gregory, Sienna said, call your lawyers, call your board. I want an emergency meeting. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Mr. Al-Jamil, you and I are going to your office. The city was a blur of neon and headlights as Sienna and her uncle raced to his downtown office. The building was a sleek, dark tower of glass and steel, a monument to the kind of cold, hard capital that had crushed her father. The drive, Sienna said, as they rode the silent, high-speed elevator. Why? Mr. Al-Jamil stared at the floor. You don't do business with a man like Aris Beaumont without an insurance policy. He is a snake. I knew. One day he might decide I was a loose end. The drive, it's my protection. It details every illegal trade, every offshore account, not just for Project Phoenix, but for the last 5 years. Including my father's company. Sienna's voice was quiet. Mr. Al-Jamil flinched. The elevator doors opened onto a dark, palatial office. Yes, he said, walking toward a massive oak desk. Including that one. Sienna felt the room tilt. Her father's ruin wasn't just like this. It was this. Her own uncle had been complicit in the destruction of his brother. Beaumont. He told me it was a mercy, Mr. Al-Jamil stammered, his hands shaking as he worked the combination on a hidden safe. He said Ibrahim was already failing, that this was a clean solution. I let myself believe him. It was easier than admitting the truth. Which was what? Sienna asked, her voice raw. That your father was a better man than I, he said, pulling a small, silver thumb drive from the safe. He held it out to her. And that I was jealous. Here. This is everything. This is Beaumont's entire empire. And mine. Sienna took the drive. It was heavy, not with data, but with sin. What now, Binti? He asked. We give this to the police. To the SEC. Our family name. Al-Jamil. It will be dust. Sienna looked at the drive, then at the man before her. He was a coward, yes. He was greedy. But he was also her family. And he was, she realized, terrified. No, Sienna said. The SEC is too slow. The police are too simple. This isn't a crime he understands. This is war. And in war, you don't just defeat your enemy. You dismantle him. She pulled out her phone and called Gregory Westwood. Gregory? We have it. We have everything. No, not just Phoenix. Everything. Yes, my uncle, is cooperating. Good. The 8 a.m. meeting is on. But it's not just your board. You need to call his partners. Call Zayani. Tell him Mr. Al-Jamil has had a change of heart and wants to renegotiate. Tell him to be at your office. And Gregory, call Aris Beaumont. Tell him the same thing. Tell him there's a counteroffer from a new player. He won't be able to resist. He has to see the kill. Sienna, my dear. Gregory's voice was thin with tension. You're bringing the wolf into the henhouse. A wolf, yes, Sienna said, looking out the window at the city that had chewed her up and spit her out. But he's not the only predator in the room anymore. She hung up. The rest of the night was a blur. They went to Gregory's office, a warm, wood-panelled study that smelled of old books and integrity. There, Sienna, Gregory, and a frantic team of lawyers. The good kind, the ones who fought for a living, not just billed for it, began to dissect the contents of the drive. What they found was staggering. It was a complete, meticulous ledger of corporate malfeasance, illegal short-selling, wire fraud, insider trading, racketeering. Beaumont had project names for all of them. Project Icarus, the ruin of a solar company. Project Midas, a gold market manipulation. And there, Project Covenant, the file on her father's firm. Sienna's hands were steady as she opened it. She saw the blueprints of her family's destruction, the forged emails, the planted rumors, the anonymous tips to regulators, and at the bottom, the sign-offs for the profit transfers. Aris Beaumont. And Jamil al-Jamil. Gregory put a hand on her shoulder. "Sienna, you don't have to. I'm fine," she said, her voice like glass. She copied the file. She copied everything. As dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline, they had a plan. It was desperate. It was theatrical. And it was, Sienna knew, the only way. Mr. al-Jamil, who had been sitting in a corner, silent for hours, finally spoke. "He will destroy me. When this is done, he will use his contacts. I will be nothing." Sienna looked up from her laptop, her eyes red-rimmed but blazing. "You were nothing when you sat at that table and watched him insult me, Uncle. You were nothing when you signed the death warrant of your own brother. Tomorrow, you get to be someone. You get to be the man who chooses to be better. It's more than my father had. It's more than you deserve." She shut the laptop. "Now go home. Get cleaned up. You all have a meeting to attend." The boardroom at Westwood Innovations was a study in transparency. The morning sun, unfiltered, streamed through floor-to-ceiling glass that overlooked the entire sprawling city. It illuminated the polished pale wood table in the center, a table so buffed it reflected the nervous faces of the men sitting at it. It was a room that held no shadows. It was a room built for truth. The atmosphere at 7:55 a.m. was stretched thin, vibrating with an unspoken, collective anxiety. Gregory Westwood sat at the head of the table, his hand steepled, his face a mask of resolute calm. He had drunk his coffee and was now just watching, waiting. Flanking him, his legal team, 2 men and 1 woman in sharp, dark suits, looked like a row of coiled springs, their identical leather folios closed in front of them. Mr. Ziani, further down the table, was not composed. He was visibly sweating, his eyes darting from the empty chair beside him to the door and back to his untouched cup of coffee. He had already blotted his upper lip with a fine linen napkin 3 times, the fabric now a crumpled ball in his hand. At the far end of the table, isolated, sat Jamil al-Jamil. He was pale, his eyes heavy, but a strange, funereal composure had settled over him. He was not looking at the door, or at Gregory, or at his terrified partner. He was staring at the empty, polished surface of the table, as if at a reflection. He looked like a man who had already accepted his fate, whatever it might be. The clock on the wall, a stark, digital display, clicked to 8:01 a.m. The doors burst open, slamming against the magnetic stoppers with a sound that made Mr. Ziani jump. Aris Beaumont did not apologize for his lateness. He stormed in, radiating a pressure that seemed to suck the very light from the room. His Tom Ford suit was a dark, aggressive charcoal, his tie a slash of blood red. His face was thunderous, annoyed at being summoned. He was a predator who had been told his meal was ready, and he was irritated by the delay. "Westwood, Jamil, Ziani," he barked, his voice a whip crack that cut through the silence. He did not bother to sit. He paced to the window, looked out, and scoffed. "This is a circus. I was told there was a counter-offer. Let's be perfectly clear. I am the offer. My bid is final. Now, if you're all done wasting my time—" "Please, Aris, sit," Gregory said. His voice was unsettlingly calm. It was the voice of a man who was not intimidated, a man holding 4 aces. Beaumont paused, his head tilting. He was intrigued by Gregory's audacity. With a sigh of profound impatience, he took the empty seat at the table's center, spreading his own files as if to mark his territory. "Your bid," Gregory continued, leaning forward, "is generous, I'll admit. But it's based on a weak from default scenario. A default, I might add, that is entirely manufactured." The blood didn't just drain from Beaumont's face. It vanished. It was the same instantaneous, waxy pallor from the restaurant. The air in his lungs, which he'd been using to command the room, seemed to lock. He stared at Gregory, his mind, a machine that was always 10 steps ahead, frantically recalculating. This wasn't in the script. He saw Ziani's abject panic, and then his gaze, like a laser, found the end of the table. "You!" he hissed at Mr. Al-Jamil, his voice a low, venomous grate. "You traitor! You pathetic, sniveling—" "He's not the one you should be worried about, Oris," Gregory said, cutting him off. "Jamil has indeed made his choice, but he is not the new player we invited. You're right. There is a counteroffer. It's from someone who has a significant amount of new, highly relevant data to present." "Who?" Beaumont roared, his composure cracking, his fury returning. "Who? What junior league banker did you—" The boardroom doors opened one more time, this time not with a bang, but with a soft, deliberate click. The sound of a single set of heels on the hardwood floor preceded the entrance. It was a steady, rhythmic, confident sound. Oris Beaumont turned, annoyed, expecting a junior lawyer, a flustered analyst. He saw Sienna, but it was not Sienna. It was not the memory he held. It was not the ghost from the restaurant. The submissive, tight bun was gone, replaced by dark, cascading hair that framed a face of cold, intelligent beauty. The simple black waitress uniform was gone, replaced by a perfectly tailored dark navy pantsuit that spoke of understated old-world power, his kind of power. The nervous, downcast eyes were gone. The eyes that met his were steady, clear, and utterly, terrifyingly cold. Beaumont's brain failed. It was a complete cognitive disconnect. He looked at her, then at Gregory, then back at her. The pathetic servant. The ghost. Here, in his world, in this room. The waitress, he finally sputtered, the words laced with a genuine, baffled hysteria. He looked around the table, his voice rising. "This is your new player? A waitress? Have you all gone insane? Is this a joke?" Sienna said nothing until she reached the head of the table, opposite him. She placed her slim, silver laptop on the table with a quiet, definitive thud. "Good morning, Mr. Beaumont," she said. The voice. That was the third shock. It was not the whispered, professional monotone from L'Étoile d'Or. It was the same clear, aristocratic tone that had cut him to the quick, the voice of her bloodline. "Mr. Ziani, uncle," she said, giving her uncle a single, hard nod of acknowledgement. She plugged the HDMI cable from the table's hub into her laptop. The click of the port engaging was the only sound in the tomb-silent room. "You are right, Mr. Beaumont," she said, her back to him as she faced the 80-inch monitor on the wall. "I was a waitress. I served you wine. I cleared your plates. And I listened." The monitor lit up. It was a simple file structure, but the folder names. The names made Mr. Ziani make a small, strangled sound, like a dying animal. "I believe you call this," she said, her finger on the trackpad, the cursor hovering. "Project Phoenix." She clicked. The folder opened. Spreadsheets, offshore account numbers, bank transfer codes, scanned, signed internal memos, the entire intricate, illegal plan to destroy Westwood Innovations. Beaumont was half out of his chair. This is slander. It's stolen property. It's inadmissible. It's this, Sienna continued, her voice overriding his, her tone never changing, is Project Icarus. She clicked again. The total and illegal dismantling of a solar energy competitor 2 years ago. I'm sure their shareholders and the U.S. attorney will be fascinated. You, turn it off, Beaumont yelled, looking at Gregory. Turn it off. And this, her voice dropped, taking on a personal, diamond-hard edge. She clicked one last time. The logo of her father's firm, Al Jamil Investments, filled the screen. Project Covenant. She finally turned from the screen to face him. Her face was a mask of cold, righteous fury. This is the file on the hostile ruin of Ibrahim Al Jamil's investment group. My father. Beaumont was no longer moving. He was a statue of pure, white-hot rage. He was finished, and he knew it. But she wasn't done. You sat in that restaurant, in your kingdom, and you insulted me. You called me pathetic. You called me a ghost. You spoke in Arabic, thinking it was your private, impenetrable code. You, in your supreme, suffocating arrogance, assumed that the woman pouring your $500 bottle of water couldn't possibly understand the complexities of your world. You assumed that because I was serving you, I was beneath you. She took a step toward him, around the table, entering his personal space. He flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible motion. You were wrong. I am fluent in 5 languages, Mr. Beaumont. English, French, Arabic, Spanish, and my best one is corporate finance. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum. It was broken, not by Beaumont, but by Jamil al-Jamil. He pushed his chair back, the scraping sound abnormally loud, and stood. He looked broken, but free. She is telling the truth, he said, his voice hoarse, but carrying all of it. Shut up, Jamil! Beaumont roared, his hand slamming the table. No, Mr. Al-Jamil said, looking at his niece, not his former partner. I will not be quiet anymore. I have given Miss Al-Jamil a full, notarized confession. I have attested to the authenticity of every file on that drive. It is all true. I am guilty. As is he. This was it. The final betrayal. The final confirmation. Beaumont looked at Al-Jamil, at Zayani, who was now openly weeping into his hands, at Gregory, and finally at Sienna. He saw no mercy. He saw no escape. He saw only the cold, hard lines of the cage he himself had built. All the polish, all the arrogance, all the titan evaporated. He was left with only the gutter. You, he whispered, his voice trembling with a fury so profound it was almost pathetic. You bitch! Sienna did not flinch. She did not smile. She had won. I am a ghost, Mr. Beaumont, she said, her voice quiet again, but carrying to every corner of the room. And this is your reckoning. And as for the data, Gregory said, standing up, a grim, righteous satisfaction on his face. Our legal team has already forwarded that drive, along with Mr. Al-Jamil's full, signed, and notarized confession to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the District Attorney's Office. They are, well, they're on their way here right now. They found the case compelling. As if summoned by the line, the elevator bay outside the glass walls of the boardroom dinged. Beaumont froze. The final freeze, the sound of a door opening, the sound of his world ending. He looked at Sienna, the waitress, the ghost, the woman who had just ended him. She didn't smile. She just watched. The ding of the elevator was the starting pistol. The boardroom, a high-altitude tomb only moments before, erupted. As 2 grim-faced detectives and an SEC agent stepped through the doors, Mr. Zayani's lawyer was already on his feet, his voice high, promising full and immediate cooperation. Gregory's team, in contrast, was silent, methodically stacking their own copies of the evidence. Aris Beaumont, however, was a vacuum. He was a black hole of pure, silent rage, staring at Sienna as the detectives approached him. The walk from the glass-walled boardroom to the lobby was a public gauntlet. The anonymous tip placed by Ben the second he received Sienna's one-word "now" text had paid off. A flash mob of reporters and cameramen swarmed the lobby. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The image of Aris Beaumont, the untouchable titan, the shark, his face a mask of mottled, incoherent fury, being led out of Westwood Innovations in handcuffs, was on every news broadcast by noon. The media, starved for a hero, descended on Sienna. They dubbed her the waitress who nailed a titan and the ghost of L'Etoile d'Or. They offered her book deals, movie rights, and a prime-time slot on every talk show. Sienna refused every single one. She disappeared, emerging only for the necessary legal proceedings. This was never about fame. It was about justice. The noise was just a distraction from the real, grueling work that had only just begun. The next 6 months were a different kind of war. It was a marathon of depositions, witness preparations, and relentless, grinding scrutiny. Through it all, Sienna, Gregory, and her uncle formed an unlikely, quiet alliance. Mr. Al-Jamil, true to his word, was the linchpin. He confessed to everything. He was a model witness, meticulously detailing not just his own crimes, but the entire history of Beaumont's predatory machine. His testimony, filled with a quiet, devastating shame, sealed Beaumont's coffin. For his total cooperation, he was sentenced to 5 years, suspended to probation and community service. Ziani, who also testified, lost his licenses but avoided prison. For Beaumont, there was no mercy and no escape. The evidence was too vast, the crimes too brazen. His empire was seized by the government, his assets frozen and marked for liquidation. Project Phoenix was nothing but ashes. Sienna was in the courtroom for the final sentencing. She watched as Beaumont, dressed in an ill-fitting suit, his face sallow, was sentenced to decades in a federal prison. He was led away in chains, a shell of the man who had stormed into L'Etoile d'Or. As he passed, his eyes, once so sharp and predatory, found hers in the gallery. They were no longer arrogant. They were not even angry. They were just empty. The ghost had nothing left to haunt. Afterward, Sienna stood on the courthouse steps, breathing in the cold, clean air. The city noise a welcome, normal sound. Her uncle, looking older and greyer, but somehow lighter, approached her. "Sienna," he said, his voice quiet, his gaze fixed on the pavement. I have set up a trust. I'm liquidating my assets. Everything that's left. It's yours. As an apology. A repayment for what I did to Ibrahim." Sienna looked at the man who had been a coward, and who was, at last, trying to be brave. She shook her head. "I don't want your money, Uncle," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I never did. My father's legacy isn't assets. It's integrity. I'm not going to start compromising on that now." "Then, what will you do?" he asked, a lifetime of transactional thinking, making her refusal hard to understand. "How will you live?" "I'm going to work," she said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "Gregory offered me a job, Vice President of Strategy at Westwood Innovations." Her uncle finally looked up, and his eyes filled with a pained, profound pride. Ibrahim, he would be so proud of you, Binti." "I know," Sienna said. She put a hand on his arm, a brief, final connection. "Go, and be better, Uncle." He nodded, a single, sharp motion of acceptance. He turned and walked down the steps, not as a titan, not as a failure, but just as a man. A free man, in a way Heiress Beaumont would never be again. Epilogue. 6 months later, the main dining room at L'Etoile d'Or was buzzing. Mr. Henderson was still there, still stressed. "The VIP for the Savoy room is here," he hissed to a new waitress. "Do not, I repeat, do not spill anything." The front door opened. Sienna Al-Jamil walked in. She was not in a uniform. She wore an elegant sapphire blue dress. Her locket was gone, replaced by a simple string of pearls. She was not a waitress. She was not a ghost. She was the client. "Ms. Al-Jamil," Mr. Henderson said, rushing forward, his face a mixture of awe and terror. "Welcome, welcome. It is an honor to have you. The Savoy room is ready." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," Sienna said, her voice warm. "But no. I'd like a table in the center of the room, by the window." She was meeting Gregory Westwood. They were celebrating their first successful quarter since the restructuring. As she sat, a young, nervous waiter approached. "Ma'am, can I get you some water?" Sienna looked at him, and she smiled, a genuine, kind smile that lit up her entire face. "Yes, please," she said. "Thank you." When their meal was over, she left him a tip. It was generous. It was, in fact, 100%. Heiress Beaumont learned the hard way what Sienna Al-Jamil already knew, that the people you dismiss, the ghosts you ignore, are the ones who see everything. In his arrogance, he handed the weapon of his own destruction to the one person he thought didn't matter. Sienna didn't just get revenge. She got justice, reclaiming her name, her family's honor, and her future. It's a powerful reminder to never, ever judge a book by its cover, and to be careful who might be listening. Thank you so much for watching this story to the end. I hope you enjoyed this tale of drama and justice. If you did, it would mean the world to me if you would hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell, so you never miss another story. I have so many more to tell. I have to ask, what was your favorite part of Sienna's comeback? Was it the moment in the restaurant or the final takedown in the boardroom? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.